no problem doing that, but the problem...
So where do social justice warriors come from? In order to fully understand where they come from, we need to take a trip back to 1914. Karl Marx had predicted that, during a large-scale war, the workers of the world would rise up and overthrow capitalism and the bourgeoisie and establish a communist utopia. Well, Marx was wrong. There was no global revolution, Russia was the only country with a successful communist revolution, and it was a stunning failure. This left Marxists all across Europe scratching their heads and wondering what were they to do now. There were a couple of Marxian theorists who had an answer to that. Antonio Gramsci, in Italy, and George Lukács in Hungary, came to the same conclusion. Western culture and the Christian religion had so blinded the working class to its true Marxist class interest that communism was impossible in the West until both could be destroyed. In 1919, Lukács asked, "Who will save us from Western civilization?" That same year, when he became Deputy Commissar for Culture in the short-lived Hungarian Soviet Republic, one of Lukács' first acts was to introduce sex education into Hungary's public schools. He knew that if he could destroy the West's traditional sexual morals, he would have taken a giant step towards destroying Western culture itself. After the Hungarian Soviet Republic was defeated, Lukács fled from Hungary to Vienna. During his time in Vienna in the 1920s, Lukács befriended other left communists who were working or in exile there, including Antonio Gramsci. In 1926, Gramsci ended up in Mussolini's prison after a return from Russia. While there, he wrote his prison notebooks, and they laid out a plan for destroying Western faith and culture. His plans included ways to undermine and discourage Westerners through the intentional collapse of the existing social structure from within. Gramsci advocated not only Marxist class warfare, which was economically focused, but also social and cultural warfare at the same time. His theories surrounding hegemony and a counter-hegemony were designed to destroy Western social structure and overthrow the West from within. Hegemony, as defined by Gramsci, is that widely accepted system of values, morals, ethics, and social structure which holds a society together and creates a cohesive people. Western social structures holding society together, that is to say, the hegemony, include authority, morality, sexual restraint, monogamous marriage, personal responsibility, patriotism, national unity, community, tradition, heredity, education, conservatism, language, Christianity, law, and truth. His theory called for the media and communications to slowly co-opt the people with a counter-hegemony propaganda message. In 1923, inspired in part by Lukács and later on Gramsci, as well as sociologist Max Weber and psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud, a group of German Marxists established a think tank at Frankfurt University in Germany called the Institute for Social Research. This institute, soon known simply as the Frankfurt School, would become the creator of what is known today as cultural Marxism. To translate Marxism from economic into cultural terms, the members of the Frankfurt School, Max Horkheimer, Theodor Adorno, Wilhelm Reich, Erich Fromm, and Herbert Marcuse, to name the most important, had to contradict Marx on several points. They argued that culture was not just a part of what Marx had called society's superstructure, but an independent and very important variable. They also said that the working class would not lead a Marxist revolution because it was becoming part of the middle class, the hated bourgeoisie. So who would? In the 1950s, Herbert Marcuse answered the question: a coalition of blacks, students, feminist women, and homosexuals. But before we get into that, one cannot understand the work of the Frankfurt School without first understanding critical theory. Critical theory was defined by Max Horkheimer of the Frankfurt School of Social Science in his 1937 essay, Traditional and Critical Theory. Critical theory is a social theory oriented towards critiquing and changing society as a whole, in contrast to traditional theory oriented only to understanding or explaining it. As Horkheimer explains, the purpose of critical theory is changing society, not understanding it. Changing society how? In the manner that Gramsci and Lukács envisioned, in order to set the conditions necessary for a Marxist revolution. In 1933, the Nazis came to power in Germany, and, unsurprisingly, the Institute closed its doors and fled the country. They made their way to New York City, and the Institute was re-established there in 1933 with help from Columbia University. The members of the Institute, gradually through the 1930s, shifted their focus from critical theory about German society, destructive criticism about every aspect of that society, to critical theory directed towards American society. This would have probably been the end of it, were it not for one crucial event: the student rebellion in the mid-1960s, which was driven largely by resistance to the draft and the Vietnam War. But the student rebels needed theory of some sort. They couldn't just get out there and say, "Hell no, we won't go." They had to have some theoretical explanation behind it. Very few of them were interested in wading through Das Kapital. Classical economic Marxism is not light, and most of the radicals of the 60s were not really into reading at the time. Fortunately for them, and unfortunately for our country today, and not just in the universities, Herbert Marcuse remained in America when the Frankfurt School relocated back to Frankfurt after the war. Marcuse's critiques of capitalist society, especially his 1955 synthesis of Marx and Freud, Eros and Civilization, and his 1964 book One-Dimensional Man, resonated with the concerns of the student movement in the 1960s. Because of his willingness to speak at student protests, Marcuse soon became known as the father of the New Left in the United States. His work heavily influenced intellectual discourse on popular culture and scholarly popular cultural studies. He had many speaking engagements in the US and Europe in the late 1960s and 1970s. In Marcuse's 1965 essay Repressive Tolerance, he claimed capitalistic democracies have totalitarian aspects. Marcuse argues that genuine tolerance does not permit support for repression, since doing so ensures that marginalized voices will remain unheard. He characterizes tolerance of repressive speech as inauthentic. Instead, he advocates a form of tolerance that is intolerant of right-wing political movements. Liberating tolerance, then, would mean intolerance against movements from the right and toleration of movements from the left. Surely, no government can be expected to foster its own subversion, but in a democracy, such a right is vested in the people, that is to say, in the majority of the people. This means that the ways should not be blocked on which a subversive majority could develop, and if they are blocked by organized repression and indoctrination, their reopening may require apparently undemocratic means. They would include the withdrawal of toleration of speech and assembly from groups and movements which promote aggressive policies, armament, chauvinism, discrimination on the grounds of race and religion, or which oppose extension of public services, Social Security, Medicare, etc. Sounds eerily familiar, doesn't it? Herbert Marcuse preached intolerance of conservative viewpoints towards race, religion, patriotism, and government expansionism, and he had a large audience to preach it to, that being students in the 1960s. Many of these students stayed in academia, where the ideology evolved, with each generation pushing something just a little more extreme each time. We'll use race as an example. Marcuse said that discrimination on the grounds of race should not be tolerated. That isn't where it stopped, though. It went from discrimination on the grounds of race should not be tolerated to criticism of race should not be tolerated. And they will silence such criticism through, as Marcuse himself put it, undemocratic means. This is all the work of intellectuals, though. You're probably pondering the origin of the modern, Tumblr-esque social justice warrior that I showed in the examples above. This, I believe, originally spread from the hippie movement, heavily influenced by Marcuse, which placed personal liberation and love above all. Everyone was an individual deserving of love. I don't disagree with this. In fact, I'm actually inclined to agree. What I disagree with is where it went years later. The idea of individuality above all later turned into, everyone is special. Now picture this. You have a child who is told every day by parents and teachers that he is special. He gets a trophy even if he doesn't win, and gets top marks on the tests even if he's wrong. It's going to give the kid some narcissistic tendencies. Now eventually this kid is going to grow up and he will have to face the fact that he's not really that special. Rather than confront that, he would rather take the ideas started by Marcuse and taught to him by sociology professors and say, "No, I am special and you're oppressing me." We now reach the information era, where anyone can make and moderate their own website. On the internet, you are not required to use your real name, rendering you effectively anonymous. When anonymous online, there are no social repercussions for posting insanity. You can do or be whatever you want. Now let's say that this hypothetical kid gets an internet connection and stumbles across, let's say, Tumblr. So he makes a Tumblr and finds many people who are just like him, who grew up being told that they are special. But as this kid soon finds, he's actually similar to these people as well. He's forced to confront the fact that he is not special. So what does he do? He says that, after some soul-searching, he's made the discovery that he is really a wolf, or sharing his head with angels and demons. Eventually, others saw this special snowflake gleam above the rest, so they mimic him. After a time, others longing to be special come across this website and decide to stay, All the while, the more rational people see the direction the website is heading in and decide to jump ship. What you're left with is a hug box of people telling each other that they are special and feeding into each other's delusions. Now that we've answered what the origins of social justice warriors are, it begs one big question. Is there a Marxist conspiracy to overthrow Western society? Personally, I doubt it. It very likely started with revolution in mind, but I think that's no longer the case. If there was some Marxist boogeyman holding the reins, then the horse bucked him long ago. Some say that it's part of a bigger conspiracy, in order to advance globalization and the interests of transnational corporations. While I doubt that it's a conspiracy, it seems as though corporations are taking advantage of it for their own gain. Conspiracy or not, cultural Marxism is malignant. It is destroying the values upon which the United States and the nations of Europe were built. It needs to be stopped. Thanks for watching.